Welcome to Focus on Health, a series of educational programs highlighting current health issues sponsored by the School of Nursing at Salisbury University. I'm Dr. Mary DiBartolo, Professor of Nursing at Salisbury University and host of the program. I welcome Dr. Robert Joyner as my guest. You are the Director of the Richard A. Henson Research Institute at Tidal Health Peninsula Regional. Welcome. So glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, we're going to talk about the science behind COVID, and you are the perfect person to do that because you are now in this research position at Tidal Health Peninsula Regional. And you've been in the job about a year, but there is so much going on that I know you want to share in general and as well with what's going on with COVID research.
Sure. So I wanted to tell you, I think you know this, but I'll start out this way. So I'm from local roots. I graduated from Salisbury University in 1991, a long time ago, as a respiratory therapist, and traveled for a while as a respiratory therapist and then went back to school.
I did not know that. I just know we were former colleagues in the Henson School of Science.
Absolutely. So I'm now the director of the Richard A. Henson Research Institute, and the way in which I like to describe that is using three categories of research. So the first category is innovative oncology. So we have a number of oncology trials that are going on, about 40 of them actually.
And that's cancer
And that's
research.
cancer research, and it's for all types of cancer: breast cancer, lung cancer, gastric cancer. And then advanced therapeutics, which you can envision are things like cardiology. We have a decent amount of cardiology research that's going on, both with devices but also with pharmaceuticals, and population health, which is kind of what we're talking about today in regards to trials that would support population health efforts.
And with regards to COVID, that's what we'll focus on today.
Okay.
We know, unfortunately, there's a climbing number of infections. I think we're at an all-time high now with infection rate as well as hospitalizations. But the good news is we have some treatments and vaccines that seem to be effective. So I know you want to talk about both of those in terms of where you're treating COVID.
Sure. So if we can start inside the hospital, I think that would be great. So COVID itself, just in regards to what happens, you can think of it as a vascular disease, but you can think of it as a pulmonary vascular disease, so the blood vessels that are inside your lungs. And COVID seems to have this unique capability of causing inflammation to happen inside your lungs. People are still studying that, but that's the important part. And the smallest of blood vessels that are inside your lungs that are connected to your air sacs are the things that allow gas to move from the outside, so the air and the oxygen and the CO2, to go into the body. The oxygen goes into the body and the CO2 leaves the body. But if you get a bunch of inflammation or swelling, injury to the vessels that are there, then that interferes with the ability to get that gas to move. And so the focus on the therapy is to reduce that sort of inflammatory reaction, the overt inflammatory reaction that's going on. Steroids is a good example of low-dose steroids in regards to reducing that inflammatory reaction, and anticoagulants to prevent some of the clotting that goes along with it. But we also have another therapy that we're using called sargramostin. And sargramostin is another one of these sort of immune modulators that you inhale. It's given by a respiratory therapist, and the theory behind it is that it enhances the immune function inside your lung to help clear out the debris that was created by the COVID virus itself. And so currently, we are the #1 enroller in the United States with which is good, right, in regards to when we're treating patients. I keep telling people that it's kind of weird to say that because we have the opportunity to be the #1 enroller, which I wish we didn't have, actually. But the second place in the United States that is just behind us is the University of Utah. So in regards to what the Richard A. Henson Research Institute is capable of accomplishing, we feel pretty proud of the idea that we're able to treat the patients that we're treating.
I know you were mentioning before the show you have at least 60 trials going on, most given times.
Yep.
That's
So,
pretty impressive.
We have about 60 trials going on, and we're following somewhere between 300 and 350 patients at any one time. And so I think it falls under that category, which is called the best kept secret, which is never a good thing, right? You have to let people know what you're doing. And there should be some comfort in knowing that exactly what we're doing is we're helping support standard care. So standard care has its own limitations. We know what it can provide. And then when you sort of run out of standard care, what do you do next? And the answer to that is that you enroll in a research trial. And Tidal Health had the vision to create the Research Institute so that we could bring those research trials to the Eastern Shore. I do want to mention one other thing. So we have a strong relationship with the Johns Hopkins Clinical Research Network. And so that is a significant portion of my job is to communicate with Johns Hopkins and to bring trials from Johns Hopkins to here so that our community doesn't have to travel to the Western Shore to receive that world-class medicine. It's right here.
It's very impressive. That's one reason I wanted to have you on the show, because I know people do not realize those kind of things are going on right here in our own backyard on the Eastern Shore.
Absolutely.
So, now what about remdesivir? Were you involved with trials regarding that specific drug?
So remdesivir became available a couple of months ago in regards to its general availability to the public. Before that, it was a research drug, and that is one of the drugs that we brought to Tidal Health early on in the COVID crisis.
Very good. Has it been shown to be effective, what you've seen?
So I think all of these things are tools in what I say is the arsenal of that the physicians have to treat the patients. So individually, it's very difficult to tell if any one of these things has a major effect. I don't think that's actually how this works. I think the way that it works best is to think of it as all of these tools are used together to make patients healthy.
And I guess some people respond to certain things more so than others. A lot of it's individualized, don't you think?
I think that's very true.
The genetic piece of things. Now, I know you want to move on to things that we're looking at as far as treatment outside the hospital.
Sure. So one of the things that's being discussed a lot are the monoclonal antibodies. So the theory behind the monoclonal antibodies is that they are neutralizing antibodies against the virus. And so what's been done is they've looked at natural antibodies against the virus, and they're able to create them in a lab now. And so they can give people a more standardized dose than what convalescent plasma did. So it is the same therapy as the convalescent plasma. It's the same idea, except it is now made inside of a lab.
Instead of having to get donations from people.
Instead of having to get donations.
Well, that sounds like a win-win.
So it makes it much more predictable.
Yeah, exactly. So that seems to be very effective, and you have some trials going on with that.
So that's now available. So
okay.
It's available to people who have COVID. They're known to have COVID, but and are at risk for developing severe COVID, but haven't developed severe COVID yet. So it's an attempt to try and prevent individuals from becoming ill. And I think we're just gaining experience right now in regards to that. So they're available. It's another option for the physicians. And I think we've given up to about 50 doses now. So that's where we stand.
Okay, and last but not least, let's talk about the vaccine.
Okay.
Would you mind explaining some of the science behind the vaccine?
Sure.
Because many people are worried that corners were cut scientifically, and really the technology has been in development for many years. So explain that and what exactly the vaccine is attacking on the virus itself.
Sure. So I think the first thing that I probably should mention is Operation Warp Speed. And Operation Warp Speed is the federal government's initiative to get a vaccine and therapeutics. So vaccines are talked about the most. However, sargramostin that we talked about just a minute ago is also an Operation Warp Speed product. So there's therapeutics that are there and the vaccine piece. Vaccines are made up, are created in a number of different ways. So you can envision them different kinds of cars. They're all get you somewhere, but there's different strategies. There's diesel cars, there's electric cars, there's gasoline-powered cars. So in regards to vaccines themselves, there are messenger RNA or mRNA vaccines that are being created. There's DNA vaccines that are being created. There are vaccines that are created from attenuated or killed virus in regards to that. And there's also vaccines that are being created by microproteins, pieces of protein of a specific part of the virus. And so lots and lots of companies are generating these different trials for these different vaccines. And the two that came along the fastest are Pfizer, which was first, and Moderna. And it happens that both of them are mRNA vaccines. And why they could be first is because the technology that's behind that is used for other things. And it's 21st century technology. It's very fast. And it's repurposed for the purpose of vaccine technology. The other technologies, so the DNA and the attenuated virus vaccine, they work, they take longer. And so one of the things that we're benefiting from is the fact that we live in 2020 and we've benefited from hundreds of years of science. And people generally ask about the risk. So why were we able to do this so fast versus what happened? You know, generally it takes 10 to 30 years. That's usually what's quoted to build a vaccine. So the reason that it is occurring that fast is because Operation Warp Speed provided the funding for the development of the vaccine. What that means is that if the government chose to support the vaccine, then the companies would actually go ahead and build the vaccine, create huge stores of it, without the risk to the company while the company was actually moving through with clinical trials. So these things happened in parallel. If the vaccine didn't work, the company was still willing to do it because they didn't have a financial risk. It would be the federal government that would have that risk. And that's actually where the risk lies. The majority of the risk lies in regards to that. It's not with the vaccine development itself, it's with the financial backing that's behind it. So if something were to happen, these companies wouldn't go out of business.
Plus the science was there.
And the science is there. So the mRNA science is much faster than the science used to create the other vaccines, and definitely plays a role.
So what can you tell us about how effective it is and safe? You know, we want to restore some confidence, you know, in people who are a little reticent about getting a vaccine this new, and it seems like it came along quickly, but we know there's science behind it.
Sure. So the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, in regards to their profiles of safety and side effects, are nearly the same in regards to that. So what people should expect if they get the vaccine, they have to understand that, one, because this is an mRNA vaccine, it doesn't contain the virus. If they get the shot, they can't get COVID from the shot. That's something that can't happen because it doesn't contain COVID. The virus itself, I think everybody's seen the cartoon of it on TV and other places, has that little red spike that's there. It's called a spike protein. The spike protein is the thing that's recognized by the body, and the body builds neutralizing antibodies against it, right? And so what the vaccine is doing is that it encodes for just that spike, and it causes the body to build those antibodies against it. That immune response can cause the person the side effects that they see. So will they get a sore arm? They certainly could. Could they get a headache? They certainly could. Could they get a small fever? They certainly could. But in general, those side effects are gone in about 48 hours, and they're generally treated with things like Tylenol and Motrin.
But that tells you the virus is working. Your body is responding and building up immunity.
So it's called reactogenicity. That's the technical term for it. And you have to have that in order to get the body to build the neutralizing antibodies. It actually is a demonstration that it's working, not a demonstration that you got COVID from the shot.
Well, it seems like a small price to pay for what we're seeing with the ravages of COVID.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm certainly waiting for my turn to get it in regards to that. Rightfully so, the people who are getting it first are the people who are on the front lines, the people who are working with COVID patients every day, and they should get it first. So the people who work in the ICU or the emergency room, the physicians, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, and first responders, people who bring patients to the hospital from the community.
And if you wouldn't mind, explain to us the concept of herd immunity. And
Sure.
they're saying that at least 70–80% of the population would need to get the vaccine to achieve that.
Sure. So the idea behind herd immunity is that if you have individuals who have had the disease, so we'll call it COVID, and if by chance you and I had it, so for example, and you and I had antibodies against it, then we wouldn't have to worry about catching COVID from each other, right? And so that could happen, although it would have devastating effects, it could happen naturally. The problem is that doing this naturally would overwhelm hospital systems. We aren't even close to that in regards to where we exist today. And watch the news. You can see the way in which our healthcare system is able to handle what we have, much less waiting for that to happen.
It's overburdened
naturally.
right now. We're running low on doctors and nurses. They're getting tired. This has been going on for a while.
So the strategy is that you use a vaccine, and the vaccine causes the body to build those neutralizing antibodies, just as it would if it got COVID itself. And so you can generate herd immunity using the vaccine, and that is the strategy in regards to that. But you need somewhere between 70 and 80% of the population to be immune before you can achieve that.
So obviously, if we were waiting for natural herd immunity, it would take quite a bit longer.
It would be a disaster.
And everyone's just ready for this to be over. I know I speak for myself and many other people who.
Well, and I agree with you. We want it to be over, but I don't want to underemphasize the idea that it would be a disaster in regards to what would happen. I can't stress enough in regards to seeing the images that you see right this second in regards to where hospital systems are right now. Tidal Health is handling it appropriately. They are doing what they need to do. People are tired. They've been at this for almost a year now, and people have described this as being in a war. And I think that is kind of a common theme in regards to that's what this feels like. People come to work for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day every day, and it's exhausting.
Well, it's such good news that the vaccine is here on the shore, and there's healthcare workers that are first in line and taking it, and hopefully we can keep that going as far as the succession of populations that are next in line.
So the one thing that I always like to say when I'm in interviews like this is that the unique thing about human beings is their ability to solve problems, right? So I present this sort of disaster scenario, but the truth is that human beings have a way to get out of this. We created it. It's called a vaccine, and it's time to move forward. Time to move on to the next challenge. There will be other challenges, but we'll get through this.
Right. Well, hopefully that's what we need to do, is just keep educating about the importance of getting the vaccine, seeing the science behind it, and that it was solid science, and it's safe and effective. 95%, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on the program and explaining the science behind all this. And hopefully people will seek out, these types of resources, listen to experts, scientists about this, because there's plenty of other information out there that may not be correct, and we need people to really focus on the science behind it so that we can move out of this pandemic.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Focus on Health here on PAC 14.